All right, small addendum video here where I'm going to be going over basically the tree of life of the races of the Elder Scrolls. Basically, what I've drawn up here is a lineage chart for all the different races that you can encounter in the world, some of which are extinct by the time of the games, some of which you'll recognize very quickly. So, without further ado, let's just get into explaining the chart. So, first and foremost, that very mysterious category at the top there, humanoid Ehlnofay. What's going on with that? Well, the Ehlnofay were basically the first creatures on Nirn, theoretically descended from the gods or the Edada or maybe even something else. Whatever they are, they're basically the first creatures, like dragons, hist trees, spriggans. And there's one humanoid race of them that is now extinct since they became all the other races. The humanoid Ehlnofay essentially went into 3 or 4 different categories. The first are Mer, and they evolved into the various elf species. And you can usually tell which species are the earliest by how much different they are from the main body of elf races. So for example, the difference between the Bosmer and the Dunmer is pretty small. It's just kind of skin tone and eye color. The difference between the Dunmer and the Khajiit is quite strong, meaning that the Khajiit probably evolved away much earlier. You can see on the chart here, the first 2 races to evolve from the Mer were the Khajiit and the Aldmer. Now, this Aldmer placement is correct. This is canon. The Khajiit one is mostly canon, though I have done some thinking about that and put it there. And the reason that I did that is essentially they've given a few different origins for the Khajiit. Sometimes they're beastmen, sometimes they're Mer. It's kind of hard to say, but I think that they're Mer because of the shape of their ears, and I don't think beastman is a real category. We'll get to why I think that in a little bit. Aldmer were the old elven race who no longer exist by the time of the modern Elder Scrolls. And they lived on basically a giant city, think like Coruscant, but magical. And there was some kind of doom that happened to it, and they were forced to go on an exodus from their home to Tamriel, the main continent of the games. And it's here that they branched out into the various elven races. First of which is supposedly the Altmer. The reason I say supposedly is that the Thalmor have actually gone back and falsified various records and historical documents in order to support their claims that the Altmer are the first. Now, it still stands to reason the Altmer are the best at magic. They may, in fact, be the most pure descendants of the Aldmer, but because of the tampering of the Thalmor, it's difficult to really say. Then there's the Chimer, the golden-skinned descendants of the Aldmer, who inhabited Morrowind before they were cursed and became the Dunmer. And they were essentially punished for some wrongdoing they did. The Iliads, Bosmer, the Dwemer, the Marmer, the Orsimer, and the Sinistra. So of these, the Iliads, Bosmer, Dwemer, Orsimer, and Marmer all are simply descendants of the Aldmer. They came to Tamriel and inhabited various regions. The Dwemer are, of course, notable for their machines, the Bosmer for their cannibalism, hunting, and various other things. The Iliads for their mastery of light magic, the Orsimer their mastery of weapons. The Sinistra are a little bit different in that they inhabit Yokuda, or did inhabit Yokuda, but a genocide by the Yokudans, now Red Guards, means that the Sinistra are completely extinct by the time of the Elder Scrolls, and there is almost no information about them. The Marmer are also slightly different. They don't actually inhabit Tamriel proper, but a maybe subcontinent, perhaps different continent, depending on how you interpret it, called Piandonea. The Marmer inhabit this place, and they're basically like ship lords. They have boats, and they can tame like sea serpents and stuff. Then there's the Falmer, the snow elves who lived in Skyrim. Through some shenanigans, the Dwemer actually turned the Falmer into what they are now. The Falmer had their own kingdom above ground, was raided by the Atmorans, now the Nords, and they went underground. Hey, Dwemer, give us some refuge. Dwemer are like, okay. Then they feed them stuff that makes them dumb and turn them into slaves. Not very nice. And that's how you get the degenerate Falmer. There's also a sidebar here, semi-elven race. The Altmer took many human slaves during the Merethic era, or the era of elvish dominance, and they interbred with these human populations, and this created the Bretons, who are part elf, but mostly human. Now, weirdly enough, elves tend to have angular faces, or like sort of extreme looking faces with like very like almond shaped eyes, very sharp jawline, kind of V-shaped face. Whereas humans tend to have more like strong, solid features, kind of square. But the Bretons are round. They're kind of round faced, which is not really what the elves or humans look like. I don't know. Moving on to the second category, these are men. The origins of men are a little more mysterious. We don't really know. Men came to inhabit three different continents, all around the same time, it would seem. Yokuda had the Yokudans, Atmora had the Atmorans, and Tamriel had the Needs. The Needs eventually interbred with the Altmer to create the Bretons. The Atmorans also interbred with the Needs to create the Imperials after they invaded Tamriel from Atmora. Those who did not interbreed with the Imperials are now known as the Nords. These are more pure-blooded Atmorans, though they probably still have some Needish blood in them, just less than the Imperials. So the Needs and Atmorans are extinct by the time of the games, unless you happen to be a very, I guess, from a very conservative Nordic family. Maybe then you're pure Atmoran. The Yokudans also didn't really die out. They kind of just were around for a very long time and their culture changed, and eventually they became the Red Guards. And Yokuda, the continent, was destroyed long ago, so the Red Guards now live full-time in Tamriel. The Needs are more centrally, or were more centrally located in Tamriel. Their northern reaches becoming, again, the Nords, and the more centralized ones, the Imperials. There was also a breakaway group, the Kothringi. It's unknown really where they fall, but I consider them to be a derived species from the Needs. The Kothringi have silver skin, which is not really in the Needs, but they also don't appear to be from the original man race because they just don't seem to be that. They don't seem to be quite as ancient as the other ones. They only really appear in the Second Age, whereas Needs existed already in the Merethic era, 2 eras prior. So it would seem they either just came here or maybe descended from someone. The Atmorans seem unlikely to me because we know what they produced, the Imperials and the Nords. But the Needs, just pure Needs, don't really have a descendant race. The Yokudans became the Red Guards, the Nords had the Atmorans, but the Needs just sort of interbreed with the Nords and then just disappear. I don't think that would happen on such a grand scale. So I believe that the Kothringi are descended from the Needs for those reasons. Now, if you think the Kothringi come from original men, I'd say that's totally fine. You can also say that without problem. I would say that it doesn't really make sense for them to be descended from the Atmorans or Yokudans because the Atmorans haven't been here very long, and the Yokudans also haven't really been here that long comparatively to the Needs. The Kothringi are kind of hard to place. And then there's our third category, and these are the artificially created life form, the Argonians. These do not descend really from the human Ehlnofay, but they are still related to the Ehlnofay. The hist trees are a type of Ehlnofay. They're sort of like living trees who are like creepy and can create life and control minds and stuff. And so they created the Argonians to protect them because they can't really move around, and there was like dragons who were like burning them and stuff, and they don't really want that. So they created the Argonians to like deal with that. So those are the Argonians. They haven't really branched out at all because their evolution is of course controlled by the Hist, and the Hist are happy with the way things are. So Argonians all by themselves. This is also why I don't group the Khajiit as part of the Beastmen, because really the only true Beastman is Argonians. And having the Khajiit be related to Argonians is like insane. Like that's obviously not true. The Argonians are a completely different life form. To say that the Hist created the Khajiit is like that's ridiculous. Then the only really other Beastman aside from that, and this one is quite unknown, are the Sloads and the Tsaesci, and it doesn't really make sense to have them related to the Khajiit either. So I'd say Myrrh looks better to me just because like having a chart where the Khajiit are next to the Argonians makes my eyes hurt. With that, we move on to the last category, the weird ones. The ones that are even harder to place than the Kothringi. Those being the Sloads and the Tsaesci. So the Sloads, they're kind of like slug people. They may not even be from Nirn. It's kind of hard to say. Then there's also the Tsaesci, who are snake people who come from Akavir. I would say that the Tsaesci are probably related to the humanoid Ehlnofay, just because that's what makes sense to me. They could have also been created by a group of Ehlnofay, like the Argonians were. Uh, Really, it's hard to say. As for the Sloads, they seem more Daedric to me, being like a leech creature. They're really creepy looking. I know that there's one prominent Sload who even worships the Daedra. So it seems to me like they have some kind of extra Nern origin to them. Again, we just really don't know. Apparently, they used to have a city that like sank into Atlantis, sank into the waves like Atlantis. That seems to imply they've been here a while, but this could also be drawing on Lovecraft lore with Relay. So it could be like they're from another dimension, but they were here before humans. It's really hard to say. So that's the fourth category. With that said, I'm just going to show this brief graphic here of everything that's gone extinct in the world of the Elder Scrolls, all the different races that have. So first in the Dawn era, you have the humanoid Ehlnofay, who of course gave rise to all these other races, most of them. And the original man probably went extinct around the same time, as well as Myr. Next, in the Merethic era, this is when the Sinistra were destroyed by the Yokudans. I know it's the Merethic era of Elvish dominance. That was on Tamriel. Yokuda, different story. The Aldmer went extinct around this time as they fled to give rise to the other races of elves. Then in the First Era, you've got a lot of different extinctions. The Falmer became the degenerate Falmer. Hyliids went extinct because of the Needs. The Needs killed all of them. The Atmorans immigrated to Tamriel and became the Nords and the Imperials. The Dwemer have a whole thing with them, but they basically just disappeared off the face of the earth. The Chimer became the Dunmer, so they no longer existed. And the Yokudans had to leave their home to become the Red Guards, so that cultural shift happened. And of course, the Needs interbred with the Admorans and were no longer present. Second era, far less extinctions, just the Kothringi seem to have disappeared around this time, but that's more the case just because, well, they hadn't thought of the Kothringi when they made the first 5 games, and then they made Elder Scrolls Online, and now there's the Kothringi. So, yeah, take it as you will. It seems like they're just kind of disappeared around that time. Maybe there weren't that many of them to begin with. And so that leaves us with 15 races still extant by the Fourth Era. Those are the Sloads, who have just kind of always been around. Tsaesci, don't know much about them. Argonians, the Khajiit, Bosmer, Orsimer, Altimer, Marmer, the Bretons, Degenerate Falmer, Dunmer, Imperials, Nords, and Redguards. So yeah, those are our 15 current races.